show me your hiding place.
We are talking The Moor, and this one is directed by Chris Cronin. Now, in case you're not in the UK, allow me to explain the Moor and what that actually means. So the Moor refers to specifically the Yorkshire Moors, which is a large rural area in the north of England. It's more or less uninhabited outside of a few pockets here and there, and mainly consists of kind of marshland areas. And couple of decades ago, there was a somewhat famous, in England at least, serial killer who was nicknamed the Yorkshire Ripper, who kind of operated out of that area. Now, this movie does feature a serial killer. It's not an adaptation of that real life event, but I wonder if it was certainly inspired by this kind of real life crime, although this is a movie with supernatural elements, so loosely inspired perhaps. But that is kind of what the Moors are, and the specific Moor that this one is talking about. So, with that being said, what is the story? Well, we have a prologue at the beginning here that takes place, I think, in the mid-90s, where we see two young kids, and they've got this young boy called Danny and this girl called Claire, and we see this young boy ends up getting taken by a mystery person, and we obviously assume that he has been taken and killed, because we learn that there is a serial killer operating in this area at this time, and he's not seen from again. Cut to 25 years later, and we now have that adult girl, Claire, who is reconnecting with the father of this missing boy, Danny, to try and find the body, so they can both have closure, and also so they can kind of ensure the guy responsible never gets out of prison. We learn he was caught, he was imprisoned, but they didn't have enough evidence to put him away for more than 25 years, so he's due to get out, and they want to ensure that doesn't happen. So they are basically desperately trying to find the body of primarily Danny, but anyone else obviously that they was a victim as well, and they enlist the help of a couple of sidekick kind of medium types, and a kind of like ranger who can help them kind of like navigate the moors. So we have this team of people having various visits, trying to use their psychic abilities, the two mediums, to try and narrow down the search about where to look. But there may well be some type of supernatural presence that could date back thousands of years, back to the Stone Age, that may be of somewhat of an antagonistic force. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's talk about The Moor. What do we think about it? Now, disclaimer, this is really a drama with supernatural elements more so than overt horror. There are horror elements. I would still put this under the horror banner. We've got serial killer, we've got psychic powers, we do have some supernatural stuff on screen, and at times it is very unnerving. But the vast majority of the runtime here plays like a drama, plays like a kind of a murder drama, that sort of stuff. So bear that in mind. It's a slow burn film, and it is about 2 hours long. So it's a little longer than your average kind of movie. But what works in this film? A number of things. Number one, the acting. I've got to say, the acting was very strong in this one. Particularly for me, the guy who plays the father of the murdered boy Danny. I mean, the guy is the performance is like this guy who is just all his obsession now, trying to find his missing son, or the body of his missing son, and the kind of like the intensity of the performance, I think, is very strong. An absolutely fantastic performance, I have to say, by him. But everyone else, is I think pulls their weight as well. They do a good job here. Believable roles, good acting. So I believe the relationships. I believe the characters that they were kind of playing. So acting was good. The director Cronin here, I think, has quite the craft in regards to making an unnerving film. This movie doesn't have loads of horror elements on screen all that often, but when it does, they hit. Now, it's not really like an apples for apples comparison, but one of my favourite movies that is I would call a quieter horror film is The Borderlands, which is a little known found footage movie from the UK, but it's really one of the most unnerving films I've watched. And this kind of reminds me of that in a way. I don't think it's personally quite as strong as The Borderlands, which is literally one of my favourite horror films. But it does remind me of the moments when it does get those kind of like those more overt horror moments, the creepy moments. Boy, I think it's really good. I mean, it's really good. They're kind of limited really to the last half an hour of the movie. And even then they're sporadic. But I've got to say, there is some really unnerving imagery here. Some really kind of very well crafted kind of like, not scares, because this isn't like jumping out kind of like things like that, but some very chilling scenes. It'll definitely send a chill down your spine in certain sequences, I guarantee it. And what pluses that as well is some great cinematography. The moors here are photographed so well and look so desolate with these kind of like misty kind of backgrounds. I mean, there's been a number of movies that have used them as a backdrop, and I don't think it always works pretty well. But the idea here is the moors are almost kind of driving you mad because they all look very much the same. You kind of, you lose where you are. You have the kind of the threat of like natural kind of like peat bogs that can kind of suck you in and things like that. So I've got to say that the cinematography really sort of captures that sort of weirdly kind of spooky, almost Celtic kind of paganistic feel of kind of nature, kind of like not wanting you in this area, which I found very kind of appealing visually. And then we have the added kind of like element of this kind of like this Stone Age kind of relics that they kind of find dotted around these kind of like markers on these stones and things like that gives it some interesting kind of mythology. The story is an interesting one. Obviously we're dealing with multiple different issues here. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with kind of like, a sense of duty, guilt from our kind of characters. Our main character, Claire, feels this kind of guilt because she kind of feels responsible for leaving her friend Danny at this one particular instance where he got taken. But then we've got all those kind of like those human emotions, and then we have, we've got a serial killer element to it. We've got the kind of a supernatural element to it. And then we've got the kind of the mystery about what's happened. Will they find the kind of like the bodies, things like this? What's this kind of serial killer who's very much treated as a kind of you never like see him. You kind of don't really know much about him. He's treated like a supernatural entity himself, even though he is just a guy. But the way that they've kind of framed him is very much like this kind of like this otherworldly threat, which I think really kind of works and gives this kind of like this serial killer a real kind of menace. Just the idea of him, even though we really don't see much of him on screen. So all that I thought was done pretty well. It is a long film, but I gotta say this is one time where I do feel it kind of worked for the film, because the film has so many kind of themes and things going on. I actually do think the 2-hour runtime kind of works in its drama-based kind of like storytelling, where, as I said, the bulk of the film is just the kind of the relationship between these kind of people and their kind of obsession, their sort of spiraling kind of kind of mental health, shall we say, as they kind of get obsessed with trying to kind of find out what's happened. And the father is certainly further down the rabbit hole, but this Claire is kind of not far behind him. So, it's all pretty good. What doesn't work? Okay. It's fair to say I had somewhat mixed feelings with this film. Now, the character of Claire, I have to be honest with you, I didn't really think she added much to the story, and she's our main character. The father is the obsessive one who is trying and pushing everyone to try and kind of go out into the kind of the moors and try and find what's going on. we have these two psychic, a father and daughter combo, who, you know, they're there to essentially, you know, communicate with the afterlife and all that kind of stuff. So we understand what they're there for. And then we have this, you know, this kind of ranger type, and she's there for kind of like health and safety and kind of a guide. So we get it. But then I didn't really feel like the character of Claire added anything to the story. And not only that, now there is something that's kind of specifically related to her, but it's literally at the end of the movie. So until then, it's going to think, I don't really get why your character's here, because you are offering nothing to the actual story. And even with what's revealed, I still feel that she was somewhat superfluous to the actual kind of plot of the movie for a large part, especially being our main character. I also really didn't. I think more could have been built up about the relationship between Claire and Bill, who is the father, because it just seemed a little weird to me that we kind of, after the prologue, which it takes place in the 90s, we cut to, you know, modern times, and then it seems like Claire is kind of living with Bill, and, you know, we learned through some dialogue that she moved away when she was like just after this, so when she was around 10 or something, and there wasn't really a lot of context about how they've kind of reconnected, what's kind of happened sort of after that. Now they're adults. It just, to me, that seemed like there was scenes missing, or that the relationship I felt was needed a little bit more substance at the beginning, because it was like, you know, are they sleeping together or something, or, you know, what's the kind of the deal here, and where's the mum? Where's this Bill's, like, we assuming they got divorced, but it's like I feel like that the elements of some of the characters and their relationships were a little lacking, to be honest. So there's that. And then we have to talk about the last half an hour, which is where we get the majority of the horror elements, if we can call it that. Now, again, I have mixed feelings about it, because I think visually speaking, it looks very interesting and very cool. But there's one point where I feel it gets a little bit over the top, and almost a little bit silly. And then the last 10 minutes, it actually turned into a found footage movie, and it's a little bit of a left turn in regards to the plot. And it ends strong, but it's the very ending is strong, but, and it's probably the best scene in the film, if I'm honest, or in a vacuum. But I don't know if it made narrative sense, to be honest. And it just seemed to take a little bit of a left turn. So I've kind of got mixed feelings, I suppose, about the actual script. That's probably what it comes down to. I think some of the character work here could have been sharper. The relationships could have been a little bit more developed, because it's a long film, and although I think it probably it didn't feel like you probably could have put it down, but to be honest with you, it could have been the same length, but I feel some scenes could have been shortened and maybe a little bit more set up in regards to certainly the relationship between Bill and Claire, to me, because that just kind of went in a little cold, and I was like, I don't, how have they reconnected? What's happened? What does she do? You know, no one seems to be working. You know, it's just like, what's going on? You know, so. Yeah, the script for me wasn't quite on point, but visually speaking, it's very strong. Acting-wise, it's very strong. And although we don't get loads of kind of like spooky stuff on screen, when we do, it works really well. So overall, if you like a slower burn, drama-based kind of horror movie, I think you probably would like to watch this one. I think I'd probably recommend it. And I'll give it a 7 out of 10. So it's a pretty strong recommendation. I do feel there's a few script issues though. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time.